Would you like to take this opportunity finally to tell the rioters to stop rioting? Yes or no?
Let me make it clear to the people on both sides of the equation, all of my brothers in Islam and all of the Christians and native people of the UK who feel like they're underrepresented. You have more in common with the people you live amongst than you do with these political elites. The people you live amongst love their children and they're struggling to pay the bills exactly like you are. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth.
The sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit. You told your millions of followers, and it was seen by 15 million people, that it was an illegal migrant who had committed these crimes. Are you prepared to apologise for that lie?
Only in the UK do we have a country so insane that we have no border, we don't know who's there, crimes through the roof, nobody's safe on the streets anymore, and then when you point these things out, somehow you're some kind of racist and bad person.
No, you're posting complete disinformation.
Oh, I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
Sir. Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of
Yeah,
course,
you
I
did.
got the wrong stabber.
Yeah, you did.
Piers, be very careful what you say.
On July 29th, a 17-year-old boy murdered 3 girls and injured 8 more children in a horrific mass stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Merseyside. The alleged killer was born in Wales to Rwandan parents, but police did not initially confirm his identity because he's aged under 18. Disinformation filled the vacuum instead. Right-wing influencers spread a battery of false claims online, including that the killer was a devout Muslim and a Syrian refugee. Riots and looting have since spread to at least 16 towns and cities across the UK. Far-right thugs have sieged mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers. Groups of armed Muslim men have attacked people in the street. These appalling scenes have become a stain on Britain's global reputation. Elon Musk has commented that civil war is inevitable in the UK. Many US conservatives are amplifying the unrest as apparent evidence of failed multiculturalism. One of the influencers accused of fanning the flames is Andrew Tate, a recently converted Muslim man whose inaccurate claims in the days after the mass stabbing have been viewed tens of millions of times. And he joins me now. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Uncensored.
It's been a while.
It has, and obviously you've, as in fact I'm about to talk to you, Nigel Farage, who is now a Member of Parliament in the UK and who's been saying some very inflammatory things in the last week or so about these riots, has blamed you, named you in a radio interview as for the person who spread the disinformation, which he then believed. I want to start by playing a clip of a video you posted to Instagram, I think it was, on the 29th of July, that you posted to various social media platforms, in which was your response to what had happened.
So an undocumented migrant decided to go into a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knows where he's from. The media is, of course, hiding the fact that this is a 17-year-old male. They don't want to highlight how ridiculous it is that we allow military-aged males, combatants, to flood our shores. I don't see any protests in the UK. I don't see anybody complaining. Nobody's outside of the school. Nobody's outside the police station. The soul of the Western man is so broken that when the invaders slaughter your daughters, you do absolutely fucking nothing.
Now that video has been viewed 15.1 million times. X limited the post's visibility because of its rules on hateful conduct. But the bottom line, Andrew, is that almost everything you said in that video was completely untrue. And yet it was apparently seized upon online, spread wide and far, and made people believe what you were saying. So my question for you off the top here is, why did you race to spread such woeful disinformation, given the massive following you have, and encourage people to take action against a caricature and description of who had perpetrated this, which was simply untrue?
Well, firstly, I'll start by saying I didn't know Nigel Farage said those things about me, which is a shame because I'm actually a fan of him. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I also understand in his political sphere, sometimes he has to hang other people out to dry to save himself because he's getting heat also. Secondly, I'll argue with you about the fact that everything I said was untrue. I think the only thing I said that was untrue is that perhaps he was undocumented. It was a 17-year-old male. It was a migrant. he did kill little girls. And advocating for people to stand outside and make it clear that they're unhappy with what happened is not a dangerous ideology. We live in a democracy where we have the right to protest and the right to make it clear when our voices are not heard. I recently protested against the Olympic ceremony outside the French embassy. I'm not sure if you saw it, complaining about how they depicted Jesus Christ, because I was unhappy with what I saw. And I think that when people feel like they have a voice, they're not likely to get violent. And the problem we have now is that people do not have a voice, which is why we're seeing rioting, which is why we're seeing looting, because people do not feel like there's a political solution any longer. And what I was trying to do is encourage people to stand up and make their voice heard in a peaceful way to avoid violence. Because when people feel like they're not heard, violence is always the end result.
Yeah, but you've actually had the complete opposite effect, and you know the massive following that you have and the influence that you can wield. And by spreading, I mean, again, you've repeated the fact this kid who has obviously now been charged with very serious crimes, including killing these 3 girls, was a migrant. He wasn't a migrant. He was born in Wales. His parents were legal immigrants from Rwanda. So he's not a migrant. He's somebody born in Wales, born in the United Kingdom.
Well, first things first, it's unfair for you to say that I've had an opposite effect. What I did was point out the facts of the situation, that a 17-year-old male killed little girls. If I point out the facts of the situation, that the sky is blue, and then people go and decide to riot because I've said those things, does not mean those things are not true. That's the first thing. Secondly, here's where we have the dichotomy of the UK, and I actually think this conversation is going to be one of the most important and potent conversations of modern times, especially as this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon, Piers. The problem we have now in the UK is that we have a certain subsect of the population who believe because he was born in Cardiff, he is a Welsh man. And we have another subsect of the population who believe that even if he was born in Cardiff, he is not Welsh. I'm currently in Romania. I'm an American and British citizen. The woman who I have a child with is Italian. The child was born in Romania. The Romanians do not consider that child Romanian, not by their view of the world. If I had a child in China, they would not consider that kid Chinese. They would look at the face shape of the child and say that's not a Chinese child. If I had a black child in Russia, they would not consider that child Russian. In the West, in the democracies, we do. But we have a problem because you now have you have a dichotomy of ideas, you have 2 different camps, and the camp that believe that this person perhaps isn't even Welsh in the first place are also the camp which are being suppressed and not allowed to speak and are being smeared and labeled as far right for having genuine concerns. And that is why things are getting exasperated and out of control. What we need is conversation, and what we need is dialect. You cannot have a multicultural democracy and ignore the concerns of one particular subsect of that culture, especially when it's the native culture, and expect everything to be fine forever. There's a lot of people who have a point of view. They didn't feel like they had a political solution anymore. And this is what's happening. The reason this dichotomy exists, Piers, please understand, if they are sitting there and they're accepting that this is a Welsh man, but now they're starting to get concerned for the safety of their children, and they don't feel like there's any kind of political solution, well, then they're going to come to the very simple and obvious conclusion that they'd rather not have anyone from anywhere else in their country to avoid these things happening again because they don't feel like there's any other political solution. This is a fail of the politicians. This is a failure of the leaders. It is the job of a leader to inspire all of the people to have trust in him, not just some of the people, not just the people he likes, not just the people on his party or the people he wants. It is his job as a leader to have every single person in the country believe that he cares about the issue and he's doing something actively to fix it. Instead, what Keir did was stand up and do the absolute opposite. Shut down any legitimate concerns, tell people they don't have a voice, tell people nothing's going to change, is going to stay exactly the way it is. And let me tell you something. I want to make this very clear. There's a lot of people in the world who would rather go to jail and have a warm bed and 3 square meals a day than watch their children die. There's a lot of people who would rather go to jail than watch their society collapse in real time around them. There's a lot of people who would really rather go to jail than feel unsafe to walk the street at night ever again. These are people who have lived in the same place for a very long time. They have a vested interest in this geographical location. And without political solutions being offered, I don't know how hubristic you must be to sit and expect anything other than what we've seen. This is a failure of leadership. And that's what's so disappointing about it.
Right. So here's my response to what you've just said. First of all Keir Starmer has said, as far as I can see, is that he is going to bring the full force of the law against people who committed acts of violence. And the violence that was perpetrated...
No, he called them far right.
Yeah, well, there were far-right thugs who were leading this, and they were attacking mosques. They were chanting anti-Muslim chants, and they were doing this because
there
was
a black person in the crowd. Would you say
you've
the
had
crowd
your
was black
say.
people?
I'm going to have my say now. It was put out falsely on social media that the person who did this was a Muslim. Not just a Muslim, but a Muslim who came in on one of the small boats, part of the very contentious ongoing issue of the small boat. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying this is what was put out on social media in a series of false posts, which then went viral, right? So he was supposedly a Muslim. Not true. Supposedly came in on a small boat. Not true. Supposedly on an MI6 watch list as a potential terrorist. Not true. None of this was true. And so on the back of that, far-right thugs who led this went up and attacked mosques, and they went and attacked hotels with asylum seekers in there waiting to be processed, and they was trying to set fire to them. Those are acts of despicable violence which were being led by far-right thugs. Now, not everybody involved in all these protests is a far-right thug. Some of them will be ordinary members of the public trying to legitimately protest peacefully. I completely accept it. But the ones who were leading it, who were committing the acts of violence and making the threats against the Muslim community, were doing so because they have been completely misled about who had done this. It was not a Muslim. It was not an illegal immigrant. It was not somebody on the MI6 watch list. It was none of those things. Now, you posted on July the 30th, the day after the killing, and I feel particularly incensed, by the way, that the deaths of these 3 young girls have been hijacked in such a reprehensible manner to attack Muslims when a Muslim had nothing to do with it, right? You put this on July the 30th, you posted a picture saying, this is the man from Cardiff. We're looking at this picture now. That murdered the little girl, straight off a boat, you said. Really? He wasn't straight off a boat, because this wasn't the person who perpetrated the crimes. You got 4.3 million views for this. And a community notes clarified, this is not the man that attacked the children and adults in Southport. This image is of Kasonga Mabulu, who was arrested in Ireland in 2023 for a random knife attack at Dublin airport. So again, 24 hours later, you're posting more. Okay. You're posting more. You're posting complete disinformation.
I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
Sir.
It's not okay.
No,
it
Piers,
was not the man.
Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of course. I got the wrong stabber.
Yeah, you did.
And he certainly looked very Welsh to me. Let me make this clear. I'm a Muslim, and I think anybody who attacked a mosque is going to have to deal with God. I'm not worried about the full force of the law. They should worry about God itself. But I also want to make something very clear to all the people at home, and clear to you, that most of the white people are very frustrated, and they're finding an enemy amongst themselves to take it out on. I think that the white people on these streets have a lot more in common with the brown people on these streets than they do with the politicians, because that's the problem we have here. Keir did not just only say they're going to face the full force of the law. He told everybody with a point of view, everybody who's concerned about the safety of their children, that they are extremists. And that is the most aggravating language you can possibly choose when people finally have had enough of not feeling safe on their own streets any longer. We have people who cannot afford to pay their bills watching migrants arrive who are now being held up in hotels at the taxpayers' expense for indefinite periods of time. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Nobody voted for it. Nobody wants it. And everybody's struggling to pay their bills. Energy prices are through the roof. Inflation is through the roof. Now they no longer feel safe on their streets. They don't want to put their daughters outside to play. The police won't protect them. The police won't turn up for most crimes unless it's something you say bad on Facebook. And when they look for a political solution, they're ignored. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? This is nothing but a leadership failure. There's not a country in the world where leadership could fail this spectacularly and see any
Andrew,
different result.
All right. But once again, Andrew, you are spouting nonsense in what you've just said. Not all of it, but some of it is nonsense. You say, for example, nobody voted for the UK to support Ukraine. We've literally just voted Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom with a landslide majority, and he made it crystal clear before that election that he would be contributing billions of our pounds to help the people of Ukraine thwart a Russian dictator. Well, you may laugh, but you just literally said the complete opposite. So we did actually vote for a leader and a party that was completely committed to dedicating billions of pounds of taxpayer money to helping people in Ukraine defeat Vladimir Putin. So that, again, is a complete untruth that you've just espoused.
I'm sure the people who are protesting up there in the north of England who can't afford to pay their bills, who are watching migrants live for free in hotels, who don't feel safe at night because the police don't have enough resources to turn up and respond to crime, are very happy that we're sending money to Ukraine. You're completely right. Yeah, the fact he only had 20% of the populist vote has nothing to do with it. And the fact that every single party will send money to Ukraine because we live in a uni-party system which is corrupt to the core in the first place. That's the reason why no matter who you vote for, the migrants keep coming. And no matter who you vote for, the money keeps getting siphoned out of the tax base and sent to Ukraine. That's the truth of it, is that most people are starting to realize and wake up from the matrix and understand there are no political solutions because it's all a scam and it's all a lie. What we need is people to understand at home that we have to think outside the box and vote for somebody who's not part of this two-party, uni-party insanity, which is why I was a fan of Nigel Farage. Even if he sells me down the river, even if he says I'm a bad person, that's his prerogative and that's his decision to make. I still believe he's the best choice as a leader for the UK.
Well, Nigel Farage is not just...
Well,
hang on. Nigel Farage has literally just chucked you under a monumental bus. He's gone on LBC radio and he said the reason that he himself was promoting complete nonsense about the person who committed these heinous crimes was because of people like you, Andrew Tate. He names you. He says that you were responsible for spinning disinformation, which he was dumb enough to believe.
Well, I never said he was a Muslim. I never said he was a Syrian. I never said he was on the MI6 watch list. The only thing I could have got incorrect is that he was an undocumented migrant. And if Nigel Farage has done that, that's his decision. He'll have to live with his conscience. I'm not here to tell him how to think. I'm also man enough to be understanding that not everybody has to like me all of the time for me to agree with some of the things they say. The biggest problem we have in the world today is that everybody's so emotional. Everybody's so upset all the time that if somebody says something bad about them, they pretend that person's completely bad. Nobody is completely bad. Nobody is completely evil. Everybody loves their children. Everybody wants to live in peace. A lot of people talk about the idea of war, but let me promise you, Piers, I'm a person who's had a very varied life. When you see people with machetes outside your door threatening you and the police aren't answering the phone anymore, you don't want war. The Muslims want peace. The white natives of the UK, the Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when you have a political class which refuse to listen to absolutely anybody, do whatever they want, grind everyone into poverty irregardless, then you're going to have some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person as opposed to turning on the rich elites who are just plundering the country. That's the truth of what's happening here.
Well, what is...
You watched
I think
my
what is
video.
really...
We played it.
Yeah,
the only thing I had incorrect was that he was undocumented. That's the only thing you could perhaps say he was incorrect. The London stabbing, Piers. The London bridge attack, he was born in Pakistan. We want to sit here and talk about how a large contingent of the people committing terror attacks in the UK and the most heinous crimes are not natively English people. And when we need to sit here and address this without being called racist, without being called far right, I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth. If we're not going to be able to point out the truth, what do you expect besides anger?
Well, I mean, the sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit is breathtaking. Right, and also, I would say you've also been spewing stuff that is blatantly racist. On the 1st of August, you posted a cartoon saying, typical man from Cardiff. Let's look at that cartoon. This has had 11 million views.
Yeah, it's a taxpayer, it's a migrant arriving on the boat with taxpayers' money, and I think a lot of people are upset about that. I want to make something clear because I'm a Muslim myself.
Well, when you say typical man from Cardiff, when you say typical, hang on. When you say typical man from Cardiff, you are again telling people that in your estimation, the person that committed this came in as an illegal migrant on a boat. That is not true. None of that is true.
Well, what I'm actually doing, Piers, because you may not be aware of this because you're part of the legacy media machine, which is why you defended Israel so heavily.
I'm on YouTube.
You're not allowed to have your own opinion.
I'm on YouTube.
You're not allowed.
On legacy media.
You're part of the legacy media
show is on
machine,
YouTube.
and you're not allowed to have your own opinion. But let me explain something
Every
to you,
word
Piers.
of this will go up, as you know.
Perfect. I understand exactly how the media machine works. The fact that they kept highlighting that he's from Cardiff and showing pictures of him as a child, as opposed to showing pictures of him as the large, barbaric man he was, which stabbed those little girls, was a deliberate PR spin by the propaganda arm of the British government to try and subvert and subdue the UK populace because they knew everybody would be outraged by what they saw. That's why every picture of him is he's a kid.
Honestly,
they keep saying he's from Cardiff. This was set up on purpose. Now, the point I was making is as follows.
He was literally born in Cardiff. The Matrix didn't pretend he was born in Cardiff. You've been posting cartoons of people coming in illegally, armed on little boats, because you want people to think that the person that did this was that person. But he wasn't.
You cut out there, Pierce. I think I understood you. I'm a Muslim myself, so there's no reason why I want any kind of violence against Muslims. That's the first thing that's very clear. And I want to make something else very clear. I'm actually in a quite unique scenario as a Muslim revert, half black, half white. I've had both sides of this dichotomy try and recruit me, perhaps. I can't be taught to hate anybody. There's no Muslim alive who can teach me to hate anybody, and there's no white man alive who can teach me to hate anybody. There's no hate in my heart, there's only love. But when you have love, you have protectiveness. And you have to feel a protectiveness for the things you care about. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. We call people hateful all the time for having a point of view, especially when they get out on the street because they feel like they need to express it. A lot of these people were not hateful. A lot of these people were full of love, and they were full of concern.
You've literally encouraged people to feel hateful. You've encouraged people to feel hateful because you've encouraged people to believe the person that did this crime, this alleged person that did it, because it's going to court, we have to let the process do its due process. But the person who's been charged with the crimes of killing these poor girls is not an illegal migrant. But you wanted to demonize illegal migrants by what you've been doing in the last week. You wanted people to believe this was one of the people who come over on a boat illegally into this country, part of the so-called invasion. And here's the interesting thing about your position with regard to your conversion to Islam and becoming a Muslim. Muslims, as you know, have been ranting about you for the last few days and utterly betraying them because you've decided to associate yourself with Tommy Robinson, who is a far-right thug, who has been spewing utter, horrible Islamophobic, anti-Muslim rhetoric all week, and yet you have not distanced yourself from him. So the Muslim community in the UK now view you as part of the enemy too. You know that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I pray for my brothers, and I think the information I've seen and the replies I've seen have not been hateful from the Islamic community. Saying to Tommy Robinson that I will debate him on issues, I don't think is failing to distance myself. I debate you all the time, Pierce, and we disagree on basically everything. I'm happy to argue with Tommy because we disagree on so many different points of view, and I think it's very important that we have conversation. The reason these riots are happening in the first place is because everybody's afraid to talk. I'm prepared to sit down with somebody I don't like and don't agree with.
That's complete nonsense.
I'm prepared to talk to Tommy.
That's nonsense. The reason the riots are happening is people like you and Tommy Robinson have been spewing utter disinformation, which has led people to believe that the person that perpetrated these despicable crimes was an illegal Muslim migrant who was on the MI6 terror watch list.
Firstly,
right. I'm saying you and Tommy Robinson,
let's be careful.
between you, okay. I'm saying between you,
but
you
where's
put
the
out
logic
there
failure?
a completely false impression.
There's a logic failure of lumping me in with somebody who I don't agree with and saying, oh, you and him said X.
So do you denounce Tommy Robinson?
Tommy Robinson and I disagree on a whole bunch of issues. And I think he's completely incorrect on his view of Islam. We're not playing this game of constant denouncing.
Do you denounce him for inciting the rioting?
I denounce him for everything bad he said about Islam. He's absolutely incorrect, and I cannot be his friend or support him for that reason.
For inciting the rioting by telling people it was a
it.
Muslim illegal
I'm not going to
migrant.
say it's not for me. It's not for me to decide who has incited the rioting, and it's not for you to decide.
Well, you can't denounce that.
A court denounce what? I'm not going to sit here and say who's in charge of the riots because nobody knows.
Telling people he was an illegal Muslim.
My view on why the riots happened is because I believe that the native population, the Christian population of the UK, feels like their voice is not heard. I think if their voice was heard and they had correct political representation, these things would not be happening.
That's not why the riots happened. The riots happened. The riots happened because people like
things are written on social media all day, every day.
No, Andrew.
And there's no riots.
No, Andrew.
People finally had enough after endless attacks where they felt like they did not get a voice anymore politically. When you don't have a political avenue, you're going to choose a violent one. I think Tommy is wrong about Israel, just like you were, because you were supporting the genocide in Gaza, and I stood up against you for that. I think Tommy's wrong on a whole bunch of issues.
No, I wasn't supporting any genocide in Gaza.
However, he has a voice. Yes, you were. He has a voice, and I'm prepared to sit here and debate with him, and I'm prepared to correct him on the things he's wrong about. And for you to sit and then you support a genocide, and you're going to say I'm a bad person for saying that little girls shouldn't get stabbed by people who don't belong in the UK in the first place. I don't care if you're a Muslim, I don't care if you're a Christian, black or white.
Okay.
Nobody should be turning up into the country without a passport.
I'm going to
Absolutely nobody.
I'm going to respond by saying this. I believe that successive Labour and Conservative governments have completely lost control of immigration to our country, both legal and illegal. They all promised tens of thousands net migration. It's never happened. We now had nearly 1 million people come in last year, net 700, 800,000, whatever it is, most of them legally, completely outrageously large number, which is unsustainable for a country as small as the United Kingdom. We've also got a big issue with, although a much smaller issue, I would argue, with the illegal people coming in on these boats and some of them dying in the process, which is an appalling human tragedy perpetrated by evil traffickers, and this has to be dealt with. So on that, I completely agree. My issue with what's happened in the last week is that we've got Elon Musk talking about there now is going to be an inevitable civil war in the United Kingdom. And I've noticed what he hasn't done, I've called him out on this today, in his series of attacks on Keir Starmer, the new British Prime Minister, he has tried to paint a picture that there is one rule of policing the right-wing thugs who've been attacking mosques.
Did he try?
Well, they have, as you know, and another rule for the for Muslims walking around armed to the teeth looking for white people to attack. I think both are completely reprehensible, and I'm easily able to say that. The problem is Elon Musk has said nothing condemnatory about the initial rioting, which has continued to go on, which has been anti-Muslim and directly targeting mosques and Muslims for something that they had nothing to do with, which was the killing of these children. And I have a massive problem with that. Yeah. And you have boxed yourself, if you don't mind me saying.
So do I, sir.
Well, hang on.
So do I,
hang
sir.
on. Hang on. You have boxed yourself into a position now where your own Muslim community in the UK are enraged with you because they believe you are siding with Tommy Robinson, who is leading a far-right series of attacks on Muslims and mosques and is being blatantly Islamophobic in the process. And you know that. And so what do you say to the Muslim community who believe that's what you're doing?
Well, if there's a small contingent of the Muslim community which believe that, I've yet to see so much vitriol like you're pretending exists. But I want to make it very clear. I want to make it very clear, Piers. I want to make it very clear here. I will answer the question. I am an Islamic revert, and I do not want to talk scripture because there's people more qualified than I, but I'll make it clear. I lead with love in my heart. The Islam I was taught was one of peace and tolerance. There's not a single person alive who can force me to take sides or to hate